Hi again. William Schnell, 30 Years a Watchtower Slave, page 102 in his chapter Strategy Pays Off. He's talking about the way the organization likening their publishers to locusts descended on communities in the New York, New Jersey area in the early 1930s. Meanwhile, the society was perfecting its organization in preparation for the battles which it clearly foresaw. It organized the Jehovah's Witnesses into divisions composed of about 15 companies, each in a compact, homogeneous area. This divisional setup would make possible quick, organized mass action and would afford each smaller unit involved a background of support for continuous, sustained opposition. Such divisions were sparked by divisional assemblies. Divisional defense funds were established for the coming battles. These funds were raised by subscription from the members of the various companies involved and were supplemented by use of a money-making cafeteria arrangement during the frequent assemblies. In this manner, the society readied New Jersey to be the proving grounds for mass action practices. It was to develop a technique to be employed everywhere in the future. The authorities, harassed by irritated and panicky citizens, played right into the hands of the witnesses by making the initial arrests. Once that occurred, the witnesses came back again and again, courting mass arrests and mass sentences, which they immediately appealed. Soon the courts of New Jersey were literally tangled up with such cases. The society could have put a speedy halt to the litigation by appealing to the principle of freedom of the press. Instead, it insisted on using the freedom of religion approach, endeavoring to force the court to declare its practices a form of preaching religion. The society realized that the longer this issue was kept alive, the more was to be gained in the end. The courts continued to hold that Jehovah's Witnesses were not being denied the freedom of worship, that they were not being molested in their worship in the kingdom halls, etc. They would even be allowed to sell books if they obtained licenses. Jehovah's Witnesses did not come into the courts with clean hands. They themselves came with a history of rough-and-tumble attack on religion. Therefore, by their very audacity, they irritated the courts to a point where they gave them their desired martyrdom in the form of fines and jail sentences. This way, the Jehovah's Witnesses made it appear as if they were being arrested, tried, and convicted for practicing their religion. They then raised a loud cry of intolerance, even though they themselves had repeatedly and openly declared religion is a snare and a racket. By use of mass action with divisional backing, they on many occasions resorted to mob violence, literally saturating a town until the jails were filled. Then they would pound away at the authorities. We knew all along that we had a right to distribute our books, booklets, and pamphlets without censorship under the Freedom of the Press section of the Bill of Rights. So far, we had refrained from using it because our present methods were drawing fire and were giving us the desired martyrdom. This had tremendous advertising value and was creating sympathy for us. And then his subhead is, "It worked." These court battles accomplished everything desired of them. The constant jar of discrimination against a minority group slowly brought about the formation of a new group of people in the land who, upon hearing and reading about these battles, began to read the many books of Jehovah's Witnesses which they had purchased in former years. These also purchased the new books, which at every turn were presented to them, and subscribed by the hundreds of thousands to the Consolation and the Watchtower magazines. This gave the book-selling campaign a shot in the arm, and publications were once again accepted upon payment of a contribution. Within the body of the American people is a tendency to rebel against anything that appears arbitrary or is caused by big organizations, as our long history from the War of the Revolution, the Boston Tea Party, and the Whiskey Rebellion eloquently testifies. It was to catch this cross-section of slumbering individuality that these campaigns were fought, and they were mainly successful. These battles accomplished another important purpose. The Watchtower Society and Jehovah's Witnesses appeared as the magnanimous champions of what they adroitly called the people of goodwill. The Jonadabs now appeared in full view as a mass, and to them the society hammered home, by means of one-sided reports in its magazines and books and booklets, that a great battle was being waged in behalf of their rights and their freedom of worship. All this was buttressed in the public press by free publicity concerning the arrest, trials, and convictions. And how wonderfully the analogy of the Gibeonites again held. The society carefully explained that they had risen to the defense of the Jonadabs exactly in the same manner as had Joshua and the Israelites in the battle with the Canaanite armies in defense of Gibeon. And as from that day on the Gibeonites had become Israel's slaves, and hewers of wood and carriers of water, so now the Jonadab class became Watchtower slaves. Then another subhead, it may be ye shall be hid in the day of his anger. It was taken for granted that the multitude now entering no longer were Christians, no longer begotten of the Spirit. They were Jonadabs who had come into the organization to escape the approaching storm of Armageddon, which could break out almost any minute. They came in order to find protection in the city of refuge, or the theocracy. They were carefully taught that if they stayed close within the confines of the organization and did not stray out of it, followed all its instructions religiously, listened attentively to Watchtower indoctrination, went out as publishers regularly, and rigidly reported the time they spent in doing so, then maybe they would be saved at Armageddon. What an incentive! But it worked and still works. This maybe salvation, in contrast to our certainty as Christians, was driven home by quoting to them Zephaniah 2, 1-3. Gather yourselves together, yea, gather together, O nation that hath no shame, before the decree come forth, before the day passes the chaff, before the fierce anger of the Lord come upon you, before the day of Jehovah's anger come upon you. Seek ye Jehovah, all ye meek of the earth, that have kept his ordinances. Seek righteousness, seek meekness. It may be ye shall be hid in the day of his anger. Of course, the Watchtower's use of this emphatic call to self-examination was a misinterpretation and perversion of the text. However, it served the purpose, and was all that really mattered. It kept the Jonadabs looking to the Watchtower as their possible way of escape in the impending Armageddon. But the Watchtower's misinterpretation of this text did more. It eloquently proclaimed to all who had ears to hear the fact that the society was not a Christian organization. For if it were Christian, it could have and would have promised safety with certainty to all who turned to the Lord in true repentance. All it could promise was a maybe escape from a trumped-up danger. Next time he talks about split personality. I'll put in a link to Organization versus Organism, how God built his theocracy, that is the only theocracy in the Bible, the Old Testament nation of Israel, how God built his theocracy, a nation called Israel. See you next time.